All right, we're live.
All right, boom. It's me. It's your boy Clem. We got Kyle here, and we have a very special guest. A guest we've, I think, literally been talking about having on the pod since the first episode. And we were like, all right, we're going to be the Mets podcast for the fans, by the fans. And I mean, there was the first person, I think, in a lot of people's minds when it came to, people on the internet who kind of spoke for the fan and the crazy Mets fans that are in this world was Matt Cerrone of MetsBlog.com. Matt, welcome to the show. Like I said, huge fans here, and we got a lot to talk about the history of Mets blog.
I appreciate it, boys. Thanks. I'm happy to be on. You're right. It's been I don't know why. I think probably affiliation with SNY for a while and schedules and who the hell knows. But I'm just happy to be here. So thanks.
Well, we're also like big dumb idiots that we like talk about things and then we never actually put things into action. So we're very much like the old owners of the Mets. There was a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So thanks for joining us here. And first of all, what do you have going on right now? Because I've cut the cord recently, so I'm on YouTube a lot more, and I see you're on YouTube. I got you on Twitter giving takes and stuff like that. What is Matt Cerrone doing right now at the beginning of 2021?
Yeah, so I mean, last year, like for most people, was consumed with COVID and still is. I'm a dad. My two girls, 9 and 7 years old, go to school like right around the corner. They're home. They're not home. They're back. They're still home. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. So like that's been the deal, and I'm just starting to kind of find a rhythm. SNY. Kind of cut back on their coverage a year ago. They had made a lot of changes. I kind of moved and got pushed aside a little bit for lack of a better term, which in some ways was fine by me because, I wanted to write a little bit less. And then the season didn't occur. It's funny. They weren't going to send me to spring training last year. And my ego was a little bummed out. My wife was thrilled. I felt a little burned, but of all the years they were not going to send me, last year was the one, because I'm thankful that I wasn't in Florida. I actually know a couple photographers, one of which unfortunately got it and died. Another one was in the hospital for a long time. And so there were people down there that I would have had dinner with and been hanging out with. So I'm thankful that they didn't send me. And then not having baseball for quite a while, I didn't write. It was kind of nice. I got to be honest. Not having to think about the team after doing it for 15 years was kind of a nice break. And then when the season came back, paid a little bit of attention, but they weren't really budget-wise wanting anybody to write on a freelance, especially me. Mm-hmm. Given I'm assuming I was the highest paid freelancer. So, and that's that. It's kind of petered out and it's kind of a weird ending. They took Mets blog off the top of the site and just went SNY Mets, which was news to me. And, again, they don't owe me jack, but that was kind of strange. And I really didn't do much. And then recently kind of felt the bug, off season starts. It's always kind of the fun time, new owner. It was like, oh shit, this is okay. I'm going to get back into this. I had no intention. And then I fired up YouTube and was like, let me try this out. I was kind of surprised to get a couple thousand views anytime I posted. Which I kind of like the fact that you could take a few days off. It wasn't like, oh my God, something happened. I have to go right on and talk about it or write about it. That was kind of nice. And I don't know, I'm kind of enjoying it. Talking to a few different guys, old school, maybe try and put the band back together kind of idea. And so that's kind of where we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So like I said, there's a few people in my life personally that are the reason that I got into writing and covering the sports and stuff like that. Growing up, I think a lot of us, dreamed of, and once the baseball dream was out of the equation, I hurt my knee like Mike Francesa. That's the reason I never made it to the big league. So then it became like, yeah, I want to cover the sports and stuff like that. And a lot of times you get into the journalism stuff and maybe, you always saw like the newspaper or the radio and much more like the clean cut profession ways to get there. And it's like that just was never me. And the way you would write on Mets blog, and then obviously KFC, who's one of our co-hosts, who he won't be on today, but you guys are the kind of the reasons you're kind of the Mets blog father of this all. And for the younger listeners, or even the people that followed Mets blog that never knew the story of how everything started, it's like one of the most fascinating stories I've heard of how someone kind of grew from where it started to where it ended up. If you don't mind just kind of giving everyone a tour of how it all got going, because it's awesome.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into it. I was living in Connecticut with my girlfriend, now wife. I was a big fan of Brian Hoke, who had MetsOnline.com and got shut down by Major League Baseball and the Mets when it was, we're talking 1999, 2000, very early on. And he went and started writing, I want to say it was the Amazing something or other for NJ.com. And I just kept kind of following the idea, but I liked this blog idea. When I went down, I followed my girlfriend down to Washington, D.C. I had nothing else really going on. She was going down there for grad school. I enrolled in the University of Maryland, I took a journalism class. I'd been working public relations for a small boutique firm that just to take even a step further back, I had my friends we all graduated high school in '94. They all went on to college. I didn't. I just bummed around. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I worked at Home Depot. I moved up to Massachusetts for a bit. Just retail jobs. Walked out of a job that I had very much like Office Space. Like I was just like, fuck this. And I got up and I'm just gonna be on the payroll. For all I know, we're still working there. I have no idea. It was a cubicle, customer service with the headphones, working with a bunch of old ladies. I mean, you never would believe it. And I was looking for work and I found this little newspaper clipping back when like that's where you looked in the classifieds for a job, and latched on with this PR guy who really was like a mentor and got me more into writing. And so I go into journalism school. We have a project, a digital media project I take blogging on. This is around the time of the Iraq War. So obviously blogging became this big deal. And I looked in what I remembered from Brian Hoke and from those guys, and I started a Mets one. And, it was just text on a Yahoo GeoCities, web page. I mean, it was just text on a white page.
GeoCities throwback right there for the people that remember that.
That's what's so unique though, is like Twitter wasn't around at this time, really, right? So it was like how people and like the Mets community comes together and just gravitates towards this like thing versus
message boards. That was a big deal, right? So like I was writing it. So it's interestingly enough, Brian became the editor of Jesus, I forget the name of it, but it was the Mets Insider. It was a magazine that they had through the 80s, and he took it over in the 90s and 2000s and let me write for it. That helped me kind of put the name out there. I was going to go with MetsWeblog.com because at the time they were weblogs. Thankfully, I bought MetsBlog.com instead and was approached by someone that was starting a domain hosting site that was a big Mets fan, John Keegan. He took me under his wing. I learned coding, learned CSS. All this stuff was on the way. Quit journalism school, used my last round of financial aid to kind of float Mets blog and me stepping out of school as sort of a business loan at that point. My wife was kind of losing her patience, or now fiance. It was time to kind of make a decision. Do I keep doing this or not? SNY happened to launch. It was like 06, 07. The team was raging. The site was growing in numbers, doing a couple million page views a month, which, at the time was a big deal. SNY had the connections. I knew plenty of people in the organization, but couldn't get a credential to save my life. And I was kind of getting a little pushback, I feel like, from the league using marks and colors and those things. So I pitched SNY. I was like, look, you guys have all the access, but no audience and nothing on your site. I've got, the content and the audience, but I have no contacts or no connections in there. So like, let's figure something out. And we did. I latched on with them and we continued to grow. They bought the site from me, made me their director of digital content. And, we did a lot of fun, good stuff there until they started to make their merge from TV and digital last few years. And here we are.
Crazy, man. And for people that were a little,
the 20
how long?
20-year fan.
Just hearing that, man. Was Mets blog, was that was that the initial name you came out? You're like, I'm just going to go MetsBlog.com, because I think that's part of the success. I don't think that not nearly all of it, but it was just such a smooth saying thing. Like with Barstool Sports, it just rolls off the tongue. MetsBlog was just like, boom, I know exactly what I'm getting there.
I was full of shit early on because I tried to pretend to be some kind of news organization. I was like, we're reporting, or we're hearing this, and Mets blog that, and blah blah blah, and the name just kind of came to be. Like I said, I was thinking Mets weblog because they were weblogs, and I went with Mets blog just because it made more sense. Mets weblog might have been taken, thankfully, and so I played that role for a while, and I think it was probably a year or two later, probably 04, 05, where I realized, aggregation started becoming the bigger deal. Mets Geek was around, if anybody remembers them. Those guys were terrific. Eric Simon was their leader. He now, or at the time, took over Amazing Avenue and helped build that out. And now, SB Nation and all that. So, I mean, we're old school going back. Like, as I say the names, I'm like, man, seems like forever ago. But yeah, I went with Metsblog because it just kind of flowed. And then I put my name on it. It became Matthew Cerrone's Metsblog.com for the longest time. And I started using my face more. And that's really where the site started to grow, I think, because there was a personal connection between the reader and the writer. And that's always how I wrote, was sort of like you and me, not, I'm on top of this mountain and you're all Mets fans that I'm speaking to. I never felt that way. I have really no ego in that regard. And so I was just writing like a journal the way a blog was sort of intended. And I think that was a big, big part of it. Because then it was sort of like, I'll link to these people, all this other sites that are happening, podcasts. I don't care where you go, just come to me first and I'll help you figure it out. And that seemed to click, and that whole concept really clicked, obviously.
Going off of that though, was there a difference when you did go over to SNY, because they're owned by the Wilpons and they're owned by the Mets? Did you feel like they had to tone down your writing in any way, or did they pretty much give you free reign to build it out because you had been successful up until that point?
The first year or two was really free reign, because I think SNY, they're separate companies, but they're owned by Sterling. So it was a weird relationship. It was very like sibling rivalry in some regards, and so there wasn't really any kind of restriction. I mean, if anything, there was a lot of, hey, say what you want, because, we want to differentiate ourselves from the Mets. We don't want to be the yes version of the Yankees. We want to have this own identity. Then there started to be, for whatever reason, as the two, I think, started to collaborate content-wise, there became a little bit more, maybe we shouldn't write this because it's going to piss these people off. It's not that it's untrue. It's just we're trying to be fair about it instead of just react emotionally. Like, let's get some information. I mean, there were plenty of times I could tell you where I would write something and Jeff Wilpon would call, SNY all out of his mind. And the people at SNY would be like, fuck you, man. This is what we're writing. I'm sorry if you didn't like it. And then there were other times where, SNY would say, maybe let's figure this out first before we just kind of go off, half cocked on this. So, I mean, it wasn't, I think people have this idea that like Jeff Wilpon was over our shoulder, like telling everybody what to do. It's not that. It's just, you want to be fair. And I think the natural reaction of fans is to just react. And I think we started to know better to not just react emotionally, like let's get a little bit of information here first and then be true to what we're saying. I'm a pretty pragmatic person. Like, we could talk politics and I've got all kinds of opinions, but I'm always sort of pragmatic. I listen, I'm slow to react in general. And I think people interpreted that on the blog to be a filter or not wanting to say what I wanted to. But I really, through the course of my time with them, I can't really remember a time where I wasn't true to what I was thinking. It just might have been slow. And so that kind of, I feel like always got interpreted as, oh, he's holding back. He's not saying what he's, but it was really just more my natural pragmatism for what it's worth.
That makes perfect sense, because actually, when we heard you having on, I was like, you know what? I went to the Wayback Machine. You ever go to that website where you can look like old school?
Often.
A little nostalgia. And I went on Mets blog, obviously, and I was just like, first of all, it was just like all the nostalgia rushing back and the blue and orange colors and everything. And even it was the perfect quick hitter content. It was kind of like with even I think KFC. I mean, obviously you were one of his influences too, I'd say. It was just like, hey, here's the story. And then it was a censor too. And I even saw something that was about, the new stadium. It was when Whispers of City Phil were coming. And you're like, listen, this is a political thing. I'm not a politics guy, but it sounds like we may have a new stadium coming. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's like there's a difference between like putting a skew on it or just being reasonable. And I mean, I think the way the world's gone these days, right? It's like you have two different sides yelling at each other and the vast majority in the middle with our ears closed saying, everyone just shut up. We're just trying to get through the day right now. And it was just a refreshing thing to look back on. And you said it earlier about how you would shout out the different blogs. I remember there would be 100 blogs on each side, all the different links. And it was a good resource for us Mets fans to have it. So listen, Matt's my guy. Mets blog's my #1 site, but I could check out these other things. If, a big move was made, you kind of want to get more opinions. I'm not going to wait until, the Daily News comes out the next day or the Post and, their website stuff. And the other thing was, which was the biggest part of Mets blog and the spirit of it. And I hope Barstool and some other blogs have kind of carried the torch on it where we're in the bar together. We're talking, amongst each other, not down. And in New York in general, I feel like it's more often than not you're getting talked down to, especially in baseball, where guys want to tell you they have the blank ballots for the Hall of Fame, or this guy deserves to get and that guy doesn't. And it just drives you nuts as a fan. While all of us fans who are pretty reasonable are like, listen, we get the sides of the story here, but some of you guys are just being utterly ridiculous at this point. I think that's the perfect way to put it. When you went to SNY. When you went to SNY, it was kind of like, oh, that's Matt going to SNY. And, there's always the sellouts, Darren deals with the 7 line. If you get a paycheck from the Wilpons, you're like a shill is what they say. But I think everyone's been very fair to everyone along the way. You have to be professional, but you also have to be a fan because the one thing about New York fans in general, they'll sniff out a fake the minute that they're in the room, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the hate that I would get, Bob Clappish actually gave me this advice like early on when the reporters were I was still, trying to get a lot of, information from them and try to understand the New York landscape a little bit. He was a huge help. And he had said, there's truth, even to the harshest criticism. You got to find the truth in it because it's not coming out of nowhere. It might be flamboyant and inarticulate and all caps and crazy, but like, there's a reason they're sending it. Think about it. And understand it. And so like, I never, all that criticism and, the crazies or whatever, people that were overreacting or whatever, to me was important. There was only one instance, there was one guy, and I can't remember his name, and you guys probably remember, I think he got arrested. There was some threats or something he was making to somebody, and I had nothing to do with that, thank God, but there was some people with the team that I think it was an issue. My wife got concerned because there was a IHateMetsblog.com for a little while, and they were ripping on her, and it was a little bit much, but like that all died, down. And again, I get it, like it's a part of the deal, and I don't miss that. It's been quiet the last few years, and I kind of like that too, because at the end of the day, for me, it was always just I watch the Mets, and this is what I think. That's it. Like it was never really ever more than that. You agree, you disagree, whatever, but like it wasn't fabricated. Like even still, like if I did a video on YouTube, like I'm just going to talk the way I'm thinking about it. It's, I'm going to listen to other opinions, but it's not like bullshit fabricated because it's what I think people want to hear. In fact, I'll never forget Ted Berg, God bless him, one time was on, because we would talk about this often, and he was on, I forget the name of the show they used to have, SNY at night, with the two talking heads in the boxes, and he wouldn't take the other opinion. Like he agreed with the other person, and they were like, "Oh no, you have to, you have to be this other." He was like, "But I'm not. Like I don't have that opinion." So, but then he agreed to it, and then when he gets on, he starts hitting him with all kind of statistics and stuff that support this other person's position, and you could see just like the paralysis of the production. Like, well, what do we do with this guy now? And he was never on again, I don't think. So that was that, and I never stood a chance. It was, just being natural and being true. Like, what are you going to do?
Well, totally unrelated, but speaking of which, what are your thoughts about the Mets current beat writer who blocks everyone on Twitter and constantly writes headline-grabbing articles that you clearly know are not going to be true? Any thoughts on that person?
You got to be more specific. Go ahead. I don't give a shit.
Andy Martino.
Yeah. I mean, my interactions with Andy were always kind of weird. You know, the first time I talked to him, I had a podcast years ago that I tried to do, which was more like about sports media. And he said to me on the podcast, I don't even know if we still have it around, but essentially his thesis was that fans don't really have a right to have an opinion because we don't have all the information. We're not in the dugout. We're not in the locker room. We don't talk to everybody. So we don't have all the information. So we can't really have an opinion, which I thought was ridiculous. We actually got in a little bit of an argument about it because, like, the whole idea of being a fan is to just react emotionally. It's to sit on the couch and yell at the player because he missed the bag or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter if he was up late that night or had an injury or whatever. I don't care. I'm mad that they didn't win. Like, it's that simple. And I never really understood that opinion. And I know, like, he gets kind of high and mighty on Twitter a little bit. And they would probably say, well, where's Matt Cerrone? He doesn't write anymore, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I just think it's all trying to inflame and get people riled up. And I don't think he's being full of shit by any means. I think that's genuinely how Andy is. I know he's a nice guy. I've met him and I know he's, you know, down in spring training. Frankly, all those guys are pretty solid. I mean, I've never had an issue with anybody. Adam Rubin is the one that I always kind of have with. But
oh no,
outside of that, like, everybody's nice. Andy too. I don't know what's legit and what's not on Twitter. What's trying to, like, troll people and what isn't, and what's clickbait and what isn't, because I'm not there, so I really have no idea. You know, I just know that I've had that one interaction with him, and that's really been about it.
Yeah, I don't know what his deal is with that. I'm blocked by him on Twitter. I've never spoken to him on Twitter. Oh yeah, for sure. But
every fan base seems to have that one writer that just, you know, sticks a thorn in their side. The Giants have theirs with Pat Leonard. It goes. The Knicks have like 5 of them. I feel like every Knicks writer is hated by a certain part of the fan base, and Andy is kind of our crossover. I think he's a Yankees fan too, which always just feels like that's what makes it hurt the most. Is that he's a Yankees fan?
It doesn't matter to those guys. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I understand it to an extent. Like, there gets a point where it just starts to become irrelevant. And I think that's actually partly why I started to distance myself a little bit, because especially with the Wilpons, like, I was just getting exhausted of the same shit over and over and over. It was the same. Every maneuver was about the budget, was about payroll, was about, you know, what they were doing. Like, and it starts to become not fun or creative anymore, because everything you write is through that filter. And so I can understand looking behind the curtain, getting to know some of these people personally. Like, it's hard to get emotionally up for any of it. So, like, I started to not, like, I had a press credential, but I stopped really going somewhere around probably 2000, right after the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even that year, like in 15. Because, like, you start to know people personally, it takes sort of the fun out of it. Like, even still, like, you know, Matt Harvey, like, I want to see him do well because I want to see him do well. You know, like, Steven Matz, like, is a great kid. I've talked to him a lot, and I know his agent really well. We went to high school together, and, like, I don't, like, I want to see him personally do good. That's not really how it should be. So, like, I understand how the reporters get very disconnected from it because it's their job and they're in it all the time. As a fan who got into it, as a fan, it was important to me to kind of remain true to being a fan. Like, you know, being able to sit on the couch and yell at David Wright, even though, you know, I have his phone number. I want to be able to, like, what the hell, man? Like, what were you in yell at the television, yell on the field. Like, I almost got thrown out Braves, Mets in the late 90s, like in Shea Stadium, yelling at the bullpen from, you know, where you were, you could see down on the visitors' bullpen. Like, I don't ever want to lose that fan, but it's hard not to get a little disconnected when you start to, you know, when you're in Jeff Wilpon's office one day just to meet him, or, you know, you hang out with this player, have dinner one night with somebody, or, you know, it's hard not to cut him some slack in a certain way. And I don't want to be that way. So I really kind of pulled back from just being around the team in general.
There's a there's a humanity in all that. And with the internet, and I mean, I live on Twitter, and you don't even know what's real, what's not anymore. Trolling and people just act tough behind a keyboard, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, there's stuff that I would probably write on a blog or say in a podcast I wouldn't want to say to someone's face. And that's even something we've tried to like figure out is like, how do we interview? Like, we're not sure how much players we want to interview, because then it's going to suck when he goes 0 for 12 and we're just like, this guy sucks, get him off my team. And I mean, the thing is, I've told Kevin at least 10 times in the 2 years since we started this podcast, like, what did you get me into right now? Like, there's just times where you just want to just turn off, after the games or whatever, where you just turn off the TV, don't look at the sports section, for like 3 days, because you just need to decompress. You can't do that when the team is your lifeline, right? It's the way you make your income. And you went through the highs, the goods, the bads, and the uglies, as I said. And LOL Mets is a thing for a reason, right? It's like we did a Mets misery bracket where it's 64. You could have made it 128, things long. And a good chunk of that was during the Mets blog era, where it's Mr. Mets flicking off a fan. You have a dildo in Kevin Plawecki's locker. You have all this nonsense. And then you have to cover some of this stuff through the SNY filter. I mean, I don't envy you. And then, like you said, to the bottom of it all is like, if you just really just the root of all this evil seemed to be the Wilpons, whether it was a budgetary move that was made, or it was a move that, like, if they had hired someone who was better at their job, you feel, or if the organization wasn't funneling through Jeff, you feel like everything would have been done the right way, which is something I hope we get to in the Steve Cohen era.
Yeah, well, that is, all of that is putting it lightly. Really, it's when you stop. I wrote a book a couple years ago, the New York Mets fans bucket list, and people can find. I think you could still find it at MatthewSerone.com/Mets book. I think, and one of the chapters was LOL Mets, and like I had to cut stuff out. Like I had somebody helping me write the book, and just going through the list was exhausting in and of itself. And again, it comes back to that. This past year or so, it was nice to not have to just deal with the Wilpons and deal with that prism. And then to get a new owner in the mix, and I think I'd said this a few places, like, even if it's still crazy, even if dumb shit still happens, at least it's different dumb shit. It's not the same cast of characters with the same way of doing things. It at least gives you something else to criticize, or a different way. Because it's just, I mean, like I said, I was just beaten down, exhausted. Like, there's just no other way to put it.
It got to a point the last summer where not the Corona season, but the year before, when before we even knew Steve Cohen was, or at least I did, where we would just argue, we would get upset about something that had happened, whether it's Cano had an awful game or Brody did something dumb, and we'd just go back to like, this all comes back to the Wilpons. And it was only about a year of the podcast at that point, and I was already exhausted, because I'm like, I know the answer. I know that at the end of it's Bowser who's ruining the Mushroom Kingdom right now. That's who he is for us. And that's who the Wilpons were, and I'm just so happy we're out of it now. Kyle, I'm sorry, you had a question?
No, I was going to say, we started that Mets misery bracket, and we were like, okay, are we going to be able to get like through all of the bracket and like before the season starts? And then Corona happened and it got delayed. And we're like, okay, we have extra time. And we ran so long that we didn't even get through the first round. So I was just curious, what would your top moment be?
Oh, dear God.
Off the top of your head.
There's a lot of ridiculous things, but I will always come back to the Adam Rubin, Omar Minaya thing, just because it was so much fun. And maybe because I had a personal connection to it. Like, I knew the parts and pieces, and I had met Tony Broussard, who was exactly what you thought after all that happened. And like, just interestingly, Ted Berg and I had been in Binghamton like 2 days before that whole incident happened. We were like, damn it, if we had just stayed a couple more days, like, but that whole thing just for me is always the one, just because, again, like, I knew all the players too. And I remember sitting there at my dining room table where I was writing, just looking at the television, like, jaw dropped, like, I can't believe this is going on. This is great. I'm so pissed that I'm not in the press room. It was the best. I don't know. That to me, but that's not even really misery. That's like more comical, because it didn't really impact the team so much, but it was just so ridiculous and so unique that I don't know. That's the one that comes to mind.
It's just something about the Mets.
Yeah.
It was perfect. LOL Mets. Again, it goes back to, knowing the fact that other fans knew who Tony Bernazard was. They knew that, Ray Ramirez's name. They knew Jay Horowitz's name. And this whole time we always we booed. Ray Ramirez would get booed every opening day. It was without a doubt. You knew he was getting booed when he tipped his cap. Jay Horowitz, who by all counts is just a lovely man. And he's you can't get a bad word about the guy on Twitter. But then every time I turn around, there's another public relations nightmare. However, I will say this in Jay's defense and Ray's defense. They leave and the same bullshit kept happening. So there was only one constant throughout the years, and obviously we know where it is. I'm not going to keep hammering the Wilpons. We've moved on. We said before opening day, we're going to take we're going to do the Michael Jordan Last Dance. We're going to read a poem to each other about our worst moments. We're going to burn it in a coffee can, and we're going to move on to a new era of Mets base. I mean, we've already I love Uncle Stevie. We already had the Jared Porter nightmare has gone through. There's currently GameStop of all things is now ruining all our goodwill that we had with. I saw Portnoy is now takes out a vendetta against the Mets, which I don't want Dave Portnoy's good juju coming against our. But again, it's going to be different. Whatever the chaos is along the way. If Steve Cohen can't get us a championship, the franchise is just cursed. I can go to my grave knowing that it was the franchise, not the people in charge of it, that were the reasons. I can live with that. But anyway, let's get to better stuff.
Yeah.
What was the best day for you to own the site? I mean, traffic wise, or just the story that you just had the most fun covering along the way?
Oh, it was Johan Santana, without a doubt. And I don't think I can yet I'd have to ask. I got to check with the person first to really, because I'm working on a book about the development of the site and really my own personal impact that it had on me psychologically and emotionally, which is a whole other story. But this one piece with Johan, there's a way we got a lot of the information in the moment when they were negotiating the contract that I still can't really talk about, but it was hilarious the way that it was going down. And just covering that whole thing, knowing I was the only person early on that kept saying they have a legit chance at this. And I got mocked by everybody, fans, reporters, national reporters. What are you talking about? And from day one, I knew how it was going to play out, and I kept writing about it. And sure enough, it came to fruition in the exact same way that I kept predicting. And that probably was the turning point too of the site. I think it helped give the insider feel a little bit more credibility, a lot more credibility, even though up to that point, I kind of had some connections on things. And that's really just because you get to know enough people. I mean, there are people that are in executive top positions, GM positions, that grew up reading the site. So it's hard not to be able to, know people and talk to people about stuff. I mean, I would get calls from people asking what I know, what have I heard, who have you talked to? What do you, because that's how it starts to work. It starts to be a trade of information. It was a fascinating thing to be part of without any training whatsoever. So to me, the Johan thing was the pinnacle of all that, and is easily my favorite part.
Yeah, I mean that was going to be my answer. And when I said you were coming on, I just got flooded. I went home, I was refreshing, I was in school, wherever you were, and you would just keep hitting that. And it was, again, I'm a Giants fan, so the Giants were going to the Super Bowl. Johan, I didn't know the Giants were going to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Johan, we have the ace that we've needed, and it was just a magical time for, I think, the Mets, Giants, Gypsies at the very least. And that seems to be the consistent. And you had Mets blog, and I think I got him probably around 04, 05, which is when that team started growing. Wright coming up, Reyes coming up. Oh, these guys are legit. We heard so much about them. I mean, I always say it, the way Peter Gammons would wax poetic. The most beautiful thing in baseball is watching Jose Reyes leg out a triple. You just got these kind of old baseball-y stories about everything. David Wright, can you confirm this? Is David Wright the greatest human of all time? Because that's literally the only thing we've heard consistently from every person we've interviewed.
I'm sure he's got a bad bone somewhere, but he's always been nice to me, and everybody that I know he's been nice to, and everyone with the organization, loved him. That last game was when he played. I mean, it was I've never really been part of anything like that. It didn't feel like a baseball game. It was very, very bizarre. The love and appreciation for him that was just being rained down on from all aspects of the ballpark was wild. Like I was getting choked up. Like I made eye contact with a couple people that I know that know him very close, and there was this weird, like, I don't know, it was just a strange day. So I don't know. Maybe he is the nicest guy in the world. No idea. He's really beloved. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, for real. And it was like, but then that even feels like, a Metsy thing where it's like to have our guy who we thought was be our Hall of Famer and spinal stenosis. It goes in the annals of anal fissures and what's the Desert Valley fever, whatever the fuck it is, thoracic thrombosis and all. And it's just like all these things. Pink eye for goddamn K-Rod. It never stops. It always keeps going. And the other thing that I loved about Mets blog, which was like a little feature, was just the fan confidence rating where you'd say, hey, how you feeling, 1 to 10 or whatever. And you just see this thing, and then you could tell the Johan trade. There's a spike, big injury. There's a spike the other way. All that kind of stuff. It was just an absolute thing. How did you deal with the collapses? Because again, you were that was the Mets blog heyday, and you had I could just go away from my computer. I just wouldn't touch ESPN.com, Mets blog, any of that stuff, and not turn on TV. How did you live through like blogging through it, for lack of a better term?
It was awful. I mean, 07 was bad. I mean, I remember getting phone calls from family, like legitimately leaving voice messages, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Are you going to be all right? Like, it was like that kind of, because it was, it was horrible. I mean, it really was like nothing. And I always felt like 08 was worse, just because though it wasn't the same, it's just like we had been through this already. You got to be fucking kidding me that this is going to happen again. Like that one, plus with Shea, it was just, that to me was worse.
It was before my time for 1986 or whatever, but everybody compared it to that. It was like they were good in 85. They won in 86. They were going to be better in 87. And to walk away from that entire stretch without any type of championship, World Series appearance, like it gut wrenching, because I was there in 2006 for the Endy catch and then the strikeout, and it was just like the worst. It was literally like the peak of my Mets fandom of being like, this team will rip out my heart for the rest of my life.
And if you remember, in the summer of 07, they were like, it felt like it was crossing with the Yankees. Like we were going from, they had A-Rod and Jeter, we had Wright and Reyes. They were they had the older guys, like they were sort of, and it felt like this was finally when the Mets were gonna, I think they were both had the best records. Yep. The Yankees were starting to drop, and it felt like, okay, this is it. And then right down the shitter. And like when I look back on it, it was so hard not to try to remain positive about it, because you just, and especially with Willie, like you just felt like it's gonna turn. It can't keep going. Like it just can't keep dropping, but it's like writing about it. And then with the fan confidence rating or the magic number, which everybody gets about, and I still, it cracks me up till this day. Like the fact that had anything to do with anything is hilarious, but I wish, if I had that kind of power, none of this would have happened. So, but it's funny nevertheless, and like it's just part of the legacy of it all. Writing about it was awful. And then 08, I spent more time at the ballpark because I think they were home more. Just kind of seeing that all in person was, and that last day at Shea in 08 was one of the worst things and best things I've ever experienced, because I was actually able, with my credential, to go down on the field after the final, once everything was done, all the pomp and circumstance, which was hard enough to watch. I was able to go down there. I grabbed some dirt and put it in my pocket. I was able to stand on the mound and pretend to throw a pitch, just before the place is closing. And so like that was awesome, but literally everything that took place prior to that was murder. So like it always stands in my mind as like this bittersweet kind of a thing. But what an era!
It's like funny, like we just casually go over, like Beltran with the bout on his shoulder in Game 7 after the Endy catch. It's like, oh yeah, that hurt. And then 2007 and 2008 happened.
I gotta be honest. Everybody goes nuts about the Endy catch. I can't even watch that. Like it doesn't. It's great. It's a great physical thing. But in the lore of the Mets, to me, it's like it's just total heartache. Like you see it, and to me, what I see is the beginning of the end. Like I see the ball going in there, and to me, we're going right down into Sandy.
I have a little bit. I have a little secret for you right here. All you do is you tell yourself he caught that ball, and that was to win the World Series, which was against the Cardinals for some reason. And the score doesn't check out. Don't worry, that's when they won the World Series. You don't have to think anything more about it. No, it was an absolute nightmare. 2008. In 2008, my friends and I, we pooled together. We got season tickets, and we did like a draft for all the games. And obviously, the last game at Shea was like the number one ticket. It was that opening day, the Subway Series, the usuals, and I thank God every day that I ended up having like the 6th pick and I had no chance for that last game, because everyone says it was like going to a party and you walked in, you didn't realize it was a funeral. And that's like the best way I've heard it explained to me.
But that's the thing, is you kind of knew it could be because of 07 and because of 06. Like and plus you're a Mets fan. Like you know, you just kind of knew this could be a fucking disaster. It could also be amazing. This could be amazing. This could be one of the best days in the history of the organization, and it very well could be the worst.
Yeah, I feel like that ruined parts of the fan base, because now the slate is wiped clean, and like I think it's been a great offseason. Obviously, we've gotten some big acquisitions, but now you have these fans who are like, "Well, we're not doing enough," and it's like, how quickly you've forgotten, but at the same time, how quickly the sky is falling. And it's like, just relax. He said it's a 3 to 5 year plan. What are your thoughts on the 3 to 5 year plan? Do you think that's something that's achievable?
Well, you know, weirdly, I do. I know it's crazy. Because he was so, that opening press conference was one of the best things I've ever, that might be one of the best moments in the history of the franchise. You know, there's 86, obviously I wasn't around, you know, prior really to that in terms of fanship. I mean, that the boldness of those statements were like nothing we'd ever really heard before. I mean, I'm a Jets fan on top of it, so you know. But I mean, I think the moves have been fine. You know, the Lindor trade obviously was amazing, and I still think there's another thing coming, whether it's Bauer or trading for a third baseman. I really think this third base, second base, McNeil Davis thing is something's not. I just, my hunch is come opening day, that's not how that's going to shake. And I don't know what that means. The fact that they didn't go after Springer, you know, would indicate, now that could be because of the DH up in the air. You know, Brad Hand, he was losing out on him, but I think he wanted to be a closer, you know, wanted to know he'd be a closer. And the Nationals defer money the way they do all the time. So like that deal made sense for him. And, you know, I think the bullpen, they're doing fine, but there's that other piece, that other big move. I'm not sold on Trevor Bauer, but if they got him, it would be a big deal. There'd be, you know, you'd want to be pragmatic about it and maybe even realistic about, like, well, he's only had a couple good years, but like at the same time, you know, it's a huge get, and DeGrom, him, you know, that's a big deal. So if that's the move, you know, that's the big one, but I still feel like there's something going on either with third base or second base or some kind of something happening, you know, in that part of the roster.
I'm actually with you there, because the Cano money comes back on this year. I feel like this is, you know, you might as well spend that extra 20 mil or whatever it is down the road. I just thought about Brody, and I'm like, I can feel my blood pressure rising. I've reached the point now where I do like meditation to get the Brody things. So, I mean, that kind of goes into the moves for this year. Like, is there anything, not even like team or player wise, that you want to see or hope to see under Steve Cohen in like the near future? I know he asked, you know, fans on Twitter what they want to see, whether it's something with the ballpark, something with the franchise, anything like that. Is there anything that you're like, this is what I hope now that I actually have a real big market owner in my team?
I know everybody, it's money. I want them to spend. I just want to know what that feels like. I know that sounds so ridiculous. Oh, it's not what the Mets are about. Bullshit. Do it. Just do it. Like, I just want to know. I'm 45 years old. And be, you know, like, just once. I want to know what that feels like. I understand, the Yankees buy championships. Great. Can I know what that feels like? It'd be really nice to just have that experience, you know? Like, obviously the Wilpons were never going to do it. And we have been, I think, psychologically beaten down to think that that's not who we are as an organization. Like, I understand it's a blue collar, you know, grind it out kind of thing, but that's been born out of being that too. Like, it's kind of a yin yang, and like, you know what, that's gone. I mean, the feeling of the underdog and all that, I understand. I enjoy it. It's, I think, why I'm a Jets fan. I was a Heat fan when they first debuted. Like, I remember those shit teams in the late 80s or 90s. you know, and so I get the underdog piece, but you know, do it. Just go for it, and let's be that team. Like, why can't the Mets be, you know, the Dodgers on the East Coast, or take the reins from the Yankees? Like, why can't that happen? Why is that not allowed? So like,
I mean,
go for it.
You said it. I mean, you were covering the Mets like when the Beltran signing happened, Pedro. That was when I was like, oh my God, are we gonna be like the Yankees? We're in the same town as them. I mean, not even the Yankees, but just like a smaller version of the Yankees, I would be fine with. And I feel like that's we don't know what the luxury tax will look like after the CBA next year and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, money, the way the groan, I laugh when you did the groan because every Mets fan recognizes that. It's like we're all part of the same breed of dog. Like it's like, oh, that's a Mets fan right there. He's been through the ringer. So just money is a fair thing. I want more of like a kid friendly or just the chop shops. I think everyone always wants the chop shops to get built up to something that could resemble some sort of a family-friendly atmosphere. Obviously, you have kids, I have two of my own, but I just would take a winning team at this point. I want my kids to be proud to be Mets fans when they're
old. I'm with you on that. I'm not a big statue person. I think a lot of that stuff, it's just not, you know, I don't put people on pedestals that way. So like, you know, I don't get all too worked up about that. You know, the angles of the seats, you know, all these things. Like, I don't know. That doesn't get me all worked up. To me, it's about, like, I watch more games from my couch, you know, like I high five my buddies more than, you know, anybody at the ballpark. So like, you know, I want to have that. I just want to see what it's like to win. Like and it's strange. Like I've never been one to feel like it's my team. I don't, you know, it's my choice to root for the Mets and it's my choice to not. So like, I want to root for them and be proud that I'm rooting for the Mets. Like, it's not really much more complicated than that. And it's been a bit of an embarrassment many, many times. Again, as a Jets fan, unfortunately, it becomes like a 365-day-a-year experience. So I see this guy come in, and it's like you have the leadership, the mentality, the pockets. Like, you know, you're a fan of the team. That's amazing in and of itself. Like, you know, that he has that connection like we do. There's no reason why he can't pull that off and be as bold as he said he was, you know. And I think making the Lindor trade, that in and of itself is pretty amazing because, like, that's the deal we would have talked about and convinced ourselves could happen and maybe even knew that it could and should, but it never did. And so, like, to actually see that come to fruition is pretty amazing. And you know there's going to be a free agent signing, whether it's this year or next year, whenever. The difference, though, and this to me is the key, the Wilpons would spend money, right? They would get Beltran. They got Cespedes when, you know, that was a big deal. They re-signed Piazza. You know, they spent those things, but then they would pull back the brakes. They pumped the brakes just as the team was getting, just when they needed the other parts. That's when they pull the brakes back and, you know, pocket the difference and basically use the team as an ATM for their other businesses. And it was like, you were right there. We were right there. You just had to get, like, Johan was the difference. That was the one time where I feel like they needed the other big piece and they went and got it. But outside of that, like, they traded for Cespedes. I think they got more out of him than they probably expected. And they re-signed him, I think, out of pressure. But he was one of their own. It's not the same thing. And they could have done so much more after 15 to really build around that pitching staff, and they didn't, you know? And so, like, to me, that's a difference. I feel like this guy, my hunch, my hope is that if they're good this year, they'll add on. And if they get to the postseason, he'll add on until they win a ring. Like, that to me is who I think this guy is. It just makes sense. And that, to me, I hope is the big difference.
Then that's the thing that always drove me the craziest is we would need a center fielder. We would need a third, whatever it was, whatever position. And there would always be like one or two clear options to fill it. And we just never spent the money or made the trade or whatever it was. And I think it's also, it's very obvious. It was a pre-Madoff Mets, which is those Beltran, Johan, and then post-Madoff Mets, which is like everything else afterwards, where it was bargain hunting. The Cespedes thing was lightning in a bottle that we almost got that World Series out of. And the fact we lost it was actually kind of amazing considering how all the games went. But it's just, it's one of those things. And you just hope Uncle Stevie, with his competitiveness and money, he's not going to be a guy who's going to just settle here. And it is kind of crazy to see Mets fans on Twitter. I love Mets Twitter. But to hear people complaining about the offseason when we filled our catcher role, we got one of the best shortstops in all of baseball. We got lucky with the way the Cano thing panned out. We got Trevor May. And I think that if we don't even get Bauer, I think when the trade market begins and when the deadline comes, and if, money's still like, these teams are still struggling, it's going to be even easier to get another Lindor level player, Mariano Arenado or someone like that. And you just have to pay the bill for it. So
Arenado's the one that I keep watching, because that one makes a ton of sense, because it's really just the money. Like, you could give up, JD Davis in that deal or whoever, because they want to get, a third baseman back. But outside of that, it's prospects, maybe one good prospect, but it's not, I don't think you're giving up a ton of talent that you can't live without. And as long as you're taking that money back, which you figure they can afford, that's it. Like, to me, that's a deal. And I don't know what's going on there, because I haven't really followed it that closely over the last week or so. But, like, to me, that's a deal that makes some sense, just because, like, I feel like the trade can get pulled off in a way that makes sense for both teams. But, again, like I said before, I feel like that's the next move that was always missing. You can make the move, but then it's the next move that's really needed. And, like, you talk about Mets Twitter and the way Mets fans think and operate. I know I'm surrounded by Yankee fans. I've never in my life heard any Yankee fans arguing about the last guy on the roster or who's in, AAA that, might have to come up to the rotation. It happens. It's a little chit chat, but for the most part, they're talking top line, because that's kind of where their mindset is at. And I'm tired of that stuff. You hear the silence in my voice. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It's been fun, and I've had a lot of fun as a Mets fan, and it's been great, but, like, I just want a different experience and just to kind of feel what something, new is like.
Being able to watch MLB Network in, like, the beginning of the winter meetings and everything, and actually having us being mentioned in, like, the A block and B block of, like, the top 5 guys, like, this is nice. I forgot. And the last time I felt that was probably before when Beltran came here, because that's when we were actually getting guys. Jason Bay came. That was a disaster. Like, even Mets blog went from covering Carlos Beltran getting signed to Michael Kadire coming here. Like, that's the kind of difference in life that it happened because of Bernie Madoff.
The worst part was having to convince. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just because I was writing about it or whatever, but, like, having to convince at least myself, I can only speak for me, that, okay, this will work. Like, I can't believe I had to write words about Brad Emus. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when I look back on it, like, the amount of words and time that I spent writing about Ike Davis versus Lucas Duda is astonishingly ridiculous, So, like, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's just, come on.
That was even in 2015. It was like they had Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe out of nowhere. They completely lucked into that. They lucked into the playoffs, and then they lucked into a World Series run. And you have all these young guys making maybe $1.2 million on the season, right? And you don't turn around the following year and go get people to fill in those, like, scratch players that shouldn't have performed the way that they did in the first place. It's insanity.
That was the worst part.
And the one thing I will say is, as you're talking about the end of roster players, you could see a turn on Twitter with the Yankee fans that were getting nervous that DJ hadn't been signed yet, and we were going out and doing big moves, and just, that little voice in the back of their head saying, now that they have some sort of money and they have some juice in the market, could this be like the final off the cliff moment if we don't pull through and win? Because the next generation of fans will be Mets fans if the team does what they're saying they're going to do.
There is a little part of me that still wants another crack at them in the World Series. And it's not to say that I'm rooting for the Yankees. Like, I hope they suck and that they're like, I have no problem if they're going to go down in flames. But there is a part of me that wants to see those. I would like to see it again and see the Mets come out on top, because that's another thing that I can't get over is the Yankees winning the World Series in Shea Stadium and them playing New York, New York. It is even the tributes, honoring Mariano Rivera, I get that, that's fine. But, like, when the ex-player would come back and they would play the big video for the person who's now in competition with the Mets, that stuff drove me crazy. And I probably shouldn't, but it did. But that New York at Shea Stadium, the Yankees celebrating on the field, that one, I like it back. I just would have another crack at that team. It's stupid. Maybe because I'm married to a Yankee fan wife who every time they'd win a World Series, she'd have to blast New York, and with her jacket on, and it was exhausting. So,
God bless her too, man. You said how she back in the early days of Mets blog, she was like, "Is this going to work out?" And I know what it's like to have a fiance. You kind of look at you side eyed, being like, "Do you know what you're doing right now?" And the fact she's a Yankee fan, it's like you're going to cover the Mets, and the Mets are going to be the thing that gets you. So God bless her for being.
Even when my income was based on their success, she still would have a hard time with them. Like, she still really couldn't root for them. Like, I'm like, what, seriously?
Right.
Really?
That's a good fan, though. You got to give her that. That's a good fan. Maybe not the best wife people, like the best wife strategy, but as a fan strategy, you have to tip your cap, because nothing drives me crazier than when the Empire State Building goes from navy and white to orange and blue, based on our opening days. He's a front runner. I hate that skyscraper. Least favorite skyscraper on the planet. This was an absolute blast, Matt. It was great. A little nostalgia, a little looking towards the future. It sounds like you said maybe talking to some OG Mets blog writers down the road for something, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We keep talking about it. It's funny. I feel like it's one of these like rebooted TV shows where like people are like, "Oh yeah, we might do it. We got to find the right this and that," and then it never happens. But who knows? I don't know. I mean, I like talking about the team. I'm not an expert at this point. I don't follow it that close. I think a lot of people my age in particular with kids, like, your priorities shift, and it's hard to keep track of it all. And I think a lot of us are in that boat. So we think maybe, it'd be kind of cool just to hop on the phone, whether it's a podcast or video, a little bit of writing, of being naive and talking it out with each other, and, who should be the fifth starter, or, should they trade for so-and-so, and just kind of have that conversation between me and someone, that people would recognize from before. I don't know. We're working on it. We'll see if we can make it happen.
That'll be awesome. We got that. Sounds like a book on the way with a little. I like that teaser for the Johan nugget too. I'm very excited. Yeah. We'll get random DMs from people, and sometimes it'll be BS, sometimes it'll be real. I was told that the Mets and Springer were on the goal line. I was told that by a source. The same source told me Beltran was getting fired like 3 days or 2 days before he got fired. So you never know who to trust. We had the Uncle Stevie deal falling apart before anyone else did. So it's very tough knowing which nuggets. So I can't wait to find out how you became an insider. Then people look for you for every information. It's like, guys, I got nothing right now. So that'll be good. We'll keep an eye out for the book. We got hopefully a little Mets blog reboot when we could all maybe get together, maybe do something either at the stadium, at Barstool, or something like that. Yeah. I'd love to have you talk with KFC and Brendan, who, they're two baseball Mets blog OG guys as well. And Brendan's like our super producer. He could have picked your brain for hours just on the site and the way it worked and the way you kind of got everything going. So thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Thanks.
All right, we'll check you out on YouTube and Twitter and everything else. So LFGM, baby, let's go. Brighter futures ahead.
Gotta believe.
Thanks. Bye.